everything you've ever quote unquote dreamed of. And you could have Ferraris and vacation homes and all this crap and literally be completely miserable. You can have all that stuff and be totally happy, but you could also be flat broke and have nothing and be at rock bottom and be the happiest you've ever been in your life. Because they say what is something over $80,000 a year with inflation, it's probably $100,000 a year. Happiness doesn't keep going up with money. There's some type of law of diminishing returns. And if I look back at the happiest times in my life, far past, it was when I was just like broke, working a dead-end lawn care job, sucked, trapped. But I had an iPod and I would listen to music and audiobooks all day and just let go and go into a state of pure meditational bliss and bewilderment, which you could look and say that's completely irresponsible. You need to be in the grid. And if you have like a family and you have people depending on you and a mortgage to pay and all that stuff, I mean, of course you have to make money and be present with your family and all these things. And there isn't much time left anymore to be in that state of bewilderment. Jordan Peterson talked about this Peter Pan syndrome thing where he talks about like, late teen years, you're bucking the system. You don't want to put on the handcuffs of conformity and go out and take on all this responsibility. You just want to be free. But eventually you have to. Otherwise, because if you don't got your act together in your late 20s, people will let you off the hook if you're in your late teens or even early 20s. Man, hey, he's in his 20s. He's trying to get his act together. He still hasn't figured out what he wants to do yet. You know, you're still jumping from job to job or you can't get your act together. But if you're, I guess, making life difficult for other people, that's when there's a problem. But if you're like, this is Jordan Peterson talking, he said something interesting. If you're like in your early 30s and you still don't have your act together, nobody cares. Nobody has your back. Nobody's trying to defend you anymore. Actually, people will be like, what is wrong with you? What have you been doing the last 10 years? Why don't you have your act together? You're not getting a free pass. So I'm fascinated by this. I'll tell a quick story. I have a cousin who was a rock and roll band guy. Whole gig. Long hair, guitars, in a band, and he was good. But he had a mortgage and a career and a wife and kids. And as the years went by and his 20s went by and now he was in his 30s, I'd maybe see him once a year. There was a point where it was weird. I was young and I used to sing and do music and I went to his studio to record just for fun. I sucked. That's besides the point. He was like in his 30s now and I was young. So I wasn't even that young. I must have been 24. But he was like, 35. And I'm in his studio. And like his family's upstairs and he's like in this state of like in heaven, and he finally got enough money together to build his basement studio, the shit that he couldn't afford. And he was like playing this, I'm embarrassed to say, this young rock pop type music to me, and he was totally into it. Like he wanted to create that type of music and he was jamming to it. And I looked at him weird. He didn't know because he was still in the state of mind. And I was like, oh shit, I was like, the hell is he doing? He's like a grown-ass man, and he's got a bit of a belly, and he's got definitely a beard, and he's balding. Maybe he was like 40. Why is he listening to this like young pop music and like getting all into it? And then I was like, oh, he's suffering. And I could see it. He was suffering because he wanted that dream so bad. He wanted to go back and just be a rock and roll star. He wanted to feel the feeling. He never got his real chance to really play it out in a band, and that old part of him was still holding on. And then I saw him a few years later at a wedding. This is my cousin, and I can tell you who he is, but I love my cousin. He's awesome. I saw him a few years later at a wedding, and it was like he had quantum leaped as a man. His eyes. There's something happens with someone's eyes when they let go and they move into a place of maturity and bliss. His eyes were angelic, and he just looked at peace, and he had this big smile, and he was just in the moment and with his family, as though he had totally let go of all that. Of course, he still plays guitar here and there. He's still got guitars and but he doesn't care. He's like, all his studio stuff, it just got dust all over it. He let go. And my friend, Rob, who's a private mastery coach, he said, if you hold a beach ball underwater and you're fighting to hold it underwater because it's, filled with air, and eventually you'll get tired and you let go and the thing will pop up to the surface. Why? Because that's its natural state. So I think about this stuff. Like he actually let go of that old illusion, because that's all that it was, and was able to just be in the moment and embrace all the gratitude around him, right? It was very healthy and good. And then his real abundance came flowing in the second he let go, I suppose. And I've been thinking about that and thinking about when I said at the beginning of this talk, your life being in the happiest times of your life is when you're just in a state of bewilderment, like you're telling yourself a story in your head. And that story creates emotions and can seem so real to you that you feel like you're in bliss or like you're living in a complete nightmarish hell and you're suffering in depression and anxiety. In either way, it's really about the attachments and the meaning that you create out of these circumstances and stories. There are literally people who have, I'm not saying this is good or bad or right or wrong, it's just kind of relative to what I'm saying, but there's people that have $1 million businesses and like 20 employees, and employee will literally mess something up or break something or something, like bad things happen that would normally stress somebody else out, and they just laugh and go, man, I'm so glad that this employee messed that thing up, and it cost a little bit of money, but they learned a valuable lesson, and now they're going to be great for the next 5 years. Or they don't cry over spilled milk, where there's some other people that every little tiny thing that happens, they're constantly freaking out and suffering and making meaning that, oh my God, it's the end of the world, and looking for negativity. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just when you wake up and you learn and you objectify all this and keep stepping back and raising your consciousness or objectifying your consciousness, you can see, here's my point, even the happiest times of your life were also illusions. Here's something. I had a friend a long time ago who literally ripped me off. I thought this dude was my friend, man. We would laugh our asses off and tell jokes, and I even looked up to this person, and this person gave me great advice that I used in real life and actually helped my business. And then we did a small business deal together, and he totally took advantage of me and ripped me off. And my mind was blown. I was like, this person literally ripped me off and never ever paid me, and we're not friends anymore. But for some reason in my head, I still think this person is awesome, because this person I laughed with, I learned from, and I got a lot of great advice from. But I should be angry with this person forever. It's weird how you let go of the negative stuff. What I'm learning is that the higher level of enlightenment is when you can actually let go of the past, anything negative, and forgive and move on, but when you become fond of your past. I talk about before these talks, so like my mother, for real, my mom had died of a drug overdose. I love my mom. If you knew my mom, she was amazing. She was a dog groomer. She had a special way with animals. She would take in any stray animal. She had a heart of gold. I could talk about her for an hour. But then when I say she had a drug problem, and I talk about how I've lived in 32 homes and that a couple times we lived in homeless shelters and I've slept in my car. When I really go back, for instance, sleeping in my car twice, and once for like 2.5 months or 3 months, I could have let my ego and my pride down. But I had been such a hustler at such a young age. I worked 3 jobs and I had my own place already. And long story short, when I basically lost everything, I'll tell you why, so it makes sense. I worked 2 and 3 jobs from the age of 14 all the way to 20. When 9/11 hit and the whole economy had stopped, the winter came and I was a landscaper and I couldn't even find a winter job, and everybody was freezed up and nobody was spending money, and a stressful time. I literally couldn't find money anywhere, and I didn't know how to be an entrepreneur yet. And I literally went behind on my rent and lost my apartment. And then what happened was I had worked so much from the ages of 14 to I think it was 19. Anyways, I didn't even get to experience really what it was like to be a teenager. So I ended up living at my grandma's house for a couple years. And I regressed back to being in my mind, I was 18 again, even though I was 20 going on 21. And I just wanted to hang out with my friends and do music all the time and work out and go running. And I still worked all the time. I still had a full-time job. But I just totally took advantage of the situation. I couldn't get in gear and get my act together because I feel like I was some part of me was recouping. And this is just a story that I'm telling. So this is all bullshit. It's all a story in my head, right? But what I want to say is that even the things that you tell yourself that were the happiest times of your life was really just a bullshit story in your head. And the things that are the worst times of your life is a bullshit story in your head. You could literally, this sounds horrible, but go to a funeral and be in a place of crying tears of thankfulness and celebrating that person's life. Or you could perceive it as total depression and suffering, and it'll make you sick where you die yourself. How do we derive meaning from things is what I'm fascinated. And in the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Dr. Stephen R. Covey talks about between stimulus and response, between what happens to you and how you choose to respond to it. You have a choice. And no matter how small that little gap is, there's always the freedom of choice. And if you read the book, Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl. You can listen to it on audible.com, and I'm warning you before you listen to this. I mean, the book's intense. It'll show you that no matter what you're going through, you can choose to be in a state of bliss or thankfulness. Listen, if I got something that you want, I would love for you to practice today. It'd be, how can you, breath by breath, moment by moment, let go of your fears and frustrations and anxieties and the stories you're telling yourself and the meaning you're deriving of them, and choose a higher mandate, choose a higher vision and perspective. The great poet Rumi said, sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. And if you follow the Ho'oponopono prayer, you can learn about this by Dr. Joe Vitale. Has some books called Zero Limits and one called Ho'oponopono. It's beautiful. He talks about, oh, I love you, thank you, forgive me, and I'm sorry. And I love you, thank you, I forgive you, and I'm sorry, whatever variations of those. It's fall now. Again, these beautiful trees are everywhere. And what if you just sold your cleverness and you were just in awe of the beauty all around you? It's hard to when you have things gripping at you. There's phone calls to make. There's customers to take care of. But the quality of your life is the quality of your experience right now, moment by moment. I know a lot of my life has been depression and anxiety and suffering and feeling rushed. Feeling rushed is probably the number one negative thing, and all around money. And even though I have 2 businesses today that are both successful and hundreds of clients, employees, 14 people working for me, and so much going on, there are times that I have this habit in the morning. I always sleep until I wake up naturally, and I don't force myself to get out of bed early anymore because I had to do it for so many years. That's like that one thing that I want to work on is I'm very self-disciplined, but there's some things I let myself slide on all the time that I'm lazy about, and I make up justifications and excuses. And I think that it's like my middle finger up saying I had to get up at this time every single day to work at all these dead-end jobs, and now finally I have my own business. So I will literally sleep until the very last minute where I have to pop up and rush around and get ready just to get out on the door in the perfect amount of time so my employees don't think I'm late. I gotta go, man. I hope you crush it. Hey, I hope you liked the show. And if you like the Untrapped podcast and you get value from it, can you please take a minute and go over to Spotify and leave it a well-worded, positive 5-star review? It helps boost the rankings on Spotify so the show can get to more people. Therefore, these messages can get out to more people and inspire more people so then they can go out and start their small businesses and crush it and get to the next level. It's a huge deal. All right, I'll see you in the next show.